Alright, and here we are. This is our final section video for the CLA. This time we're talking about the errors and recommendations. Errors and recommendations is also a 10-point category, so this is also one of the larger categories unlike the 5-point ones. The purpose of this part is to kind of look at what may have caused mistakes or errors in the numbers you guys collected, and thinking about ways to try to eliminate those errors. So to get full credit, you should identify 3 correct errors and their sources of this in this lab. Describe each error's effect on the specific calculations and results, and then finally, try to think of a way to go about eliminating that error from the lab, or trying to minimize its effect in some way. As you begin to go right in the categories here, over to the 8.1, it looks like we are basically losing this little piece here where we're describing the effect on the calculations. And this is largely, the difference is just thorough explanation. And as you begin going further right, we have 2 correct errors. So if you only get 2, you're in this category. If you only get 1, you're down here. So make sure you are getting 3. If you can get 3 and also do a little bit, you're at least in this 8 category. And to get to the 10, you have to be thorough, and you also have to think about what's going to happen to the calculations. So let's take a look at what this has to say. Actually, let's just go right into the example here, because I have a few ideas for this. So and after the conclusion, we're going to add in our errors and recommendations. And I'm going to really kind of focus on doing 1. But once you guys have 1 done, doing the others, you're just going to kind of follow suit with what's going on here. So if you noticed when we were talking about the calculations for the predicted acceleration, each class identified the fact that there was a friction force on the cart, but we ignored it when we did our acceleration calculation for this predicted acceleration. That is kind of an issue. So our first error we're going to identify, and that's one I kind of expect all of you guys to have, would be friction. Let's think how we're going to phrase this. We'll do it this way: the effects of friction on the predicted and experimental accelerations. Alright, so once we fix my typo, alright. So if you think about how this is going to work out, if there is friction in our predicted in the experimental acceleration, and we didn't include it in our idea for how to calculate the predicted acceleration, the big thing that's going to happen here is that these are going to be higher than what they should be, because friction would act against the motion and slow things down a little bit, so we wouldn't see quite as high of an acceleration. So what I would kind of expect to see, let's just say when the predicted accelerations were calculated, friction was ignored. Although the friction in the tracks and carts is very small, it would still have a small effect on the acceleration. So the predicted accelerations are likely going to be a little higher than they should be. In future labs or future experiments, experimenters should attempt to determine the friction force before they conduct the lab and use it to calculate the accelerations. Alright, so, and when we look back at our rubric, I think that's this one, here, so far we've identified one correct error and the source of the lab's friction. We described how it's going to affect the results and also the calculations, because what we said here is that the predicted acceleration will be too high, and this would also kind of affect our end percent error as well. We could put that in there, but it's fine. And then finally, we explained a method to go about trying to identify that error and mitigate it the next time we do it. So this is an example of a good errors and recommendation page. And from there, I'd recommend trying to think of 2 more errors that may have occurred. They probably won't be quite as big as the friction force one, but there are 2 that I can think of right now that would be good things to highlight as far as the errors and recommendation page goes. As always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me. Good luck.